So my first video on perfect pitch that I made about a year ago, it has been gaining a lot of attention recently, and I wanted to answer some of the questions and address some of the comments, as well as some other things that I think that might be helpful for you to know. That video was 27 minutes long, so I felt that it was already a very long video, and I didn't want to try to make it longer. But the fact is, there are several things that I left out of that video, and a few small things I want to correct or just make more clear. I'm also going to address a few comments and questions that I received from viewers. But before I do that, I want to take a moment and talk about today's sponsor for this video. Today's video is brought to you by Ojaya Deep Meditation. This is a 100% online meditation course taught out of the Earthborn Rainforest in Iowa in the United States. Most people who start meditation, they give up after a short period of time. The reason is there's nothing wrong with the person. It's just that the method is watered down or just not very good. Ojaya meditation is so powerful and so easy that, in fact, I do not know anybody who started this practice and has stopped it since starting. I use this meditation every day in my life. The results have been phenomenal. You will be amazed, absolutely amazed at how powerful this meditation is. So go to ojaya.com today and sign up for your first 9 videos for free. Now, let's get back to discussing perfect pitch. The first thing I want to address, there are some people that still are posting that the science is unclear on if adults can develop absolute pitch. I want to be perfectly clear. The science is very clear. You can develop it. Science has proven it in several studies. There have been numerous studies at universities, some dating back to the 1980s or 1990s. It's possible. However, that does not mean that every adult who tries to develop it is going to develop it. But that does not mean adults cannot develop it. You certainly can. Now, you might be asking, why did I use Rick Beato's video as an example? Well, it's not to pick on Rick Beato or to criticize everything that he's done. There are several YouTube channels that put out a lot of content very quickly, and Rick's channel is one of those. He uploads almost daily as far as I know. But the risk of putting out content at such a fast pace is that you don't always have the time to do the proper research to know what you're talking about. And this is exactly what happened with his video on why adults cannot develop absolute pitch. If he had just done a simple Google search, he could have easily found several studies that have proven that adults can develop absolute pitch. And this is why I was very disappointed with that video. And it unfortunately contributes to the people that are leading others astray with this incorrect idea that absolute pitch cannot be developed. And again, this is the problem with a lot of these YouTube content creators putting out these hot take kind of videos. Maybe slow down on the quantity of what you're putting out and focus more on the quality. And that's what I try to do with my channel. I'm trying to put out content that is valid and true. That's my suggestion. Now, one thing I did not have time to go into in the first video is that not everybody who has perfect pitch is going to have it at the same degree. There are various degrees in perfect pitch ability. For example, some people can only hear it on their own instrument. Some people can hear it on almost every instrument. And some people, they can hum a note from memory. If you ask them to just recall a note without any reference, they can hum the correct pitch for you. That ability is known as oral recall. Some people can hear the notes perfectly well on instruments, but they cannot hum the note to you if you ask them to do it. You see, there's a huge range to what having perfect pitch is. You're going to quickly find that there's a huge range, and it's really interesting, in fact. So in the first video, when I mentioned that people have a breakthrough when they can finally hear it, yes, that's true. But there's still a huge, broad range of abilities that people with perfect pitch have, and not everybody is going to have the same ability. And if you ask people with perfect pitch, you'll quickly find out that there's a big variation in what they can and cannot do. This leads us to the next important question. How can you tell if someone has absolute pitch at the very basic level? Well, I think this is pretty simple to answer. whatever their instrument is, let's say they're a pianist, what you can do is play a note one at a time, slowly and randomly at various parts of the keyboard or piano, and they should be able to answer them almost instantaneously. Like, they shouldn't have to think about it for a very long time. If they do have to think about it for a really long time, then they don't have perfect pitch. And if they can guess 95% of them correct, and if they can guess them almost instantaneously, then you know they have perfect pitch. Everyone with perfect pitch makes mistakes from time to time. However, it should not be like 50% of the time that you're making mistakes. It should be more like 5% of the time or less. Now, a viewer of this channel left me a comment that was a very interesting question. He was basically asking me, what do we do when a note is in between two notes? Like, what happens if a note is in between a B natural and a C natural? So I was curious about this myself. So what I did many years ago was that I took some notes that I recorded on the piano with my computer, and then I had some notes that were in standard tuning. But then I had other notes that were right in the middle of two notes. So I had quarter tones that I would sneak in, that I would play back for me to try to guess. Now, what I found was that when a note was in between two pitches, like D and E flat, most of the time I would hear the E flat stronger, and that's the note I would guess. Now, I could tell that the notes were out of tune, but it was tricky to hear which pitch color I was hearing, and most of the time I tended to hear the top note a little bit stronger. But what I think the most interesting thing I discovered about this test is that there's not in-between tone colors between the 12 pitches, meaning that between the notes B and C, there isn't a unique tone color. All you're really getting is a mix of the B and the C note. There's not like a new kind of tone color in between. So I find it really interesting that the laws of nature have proven to us that there are 12 different tones. Quarter tones are not really the same kind of pitches that we have with the 12 main tones. Quarter tones do not have their own unique feeling. They just have a mix of two different tones, if that makes sense. But if you wanted to look to a way to really sharpen your perfect pitch, this could be a way to do it. The main point here is that when you hear these pitches that are in between two notes, it can be really confusing to your ear, and that's totally natural and normal. Most people with perfect pitch will be confused when they hear a note that's in between two notes. And this is just part of the real world of sound around us. You can't escape it. It's everywhere. In fact, there are many, many examples of rock and pop songs that have been sped up a little bit and are actually in between two pitches, meaning that the band is in tune with itself, but it's actually out of tune in terms of what is correct concert pitch. And if you just do some exploring yourself, you'll quickly discover that, yes, there's a lot of recordings over the past several decades that are slightly out of tune with concert pitch. Another thing I want to address is that a viewer actually wrote me a nice email asking me if the pitches that he heard in my Ralph Vaughan Williams example, he asked me, are they in the key of C minor and B minor? Because that's what he was hearing. So he was curious why I put A flat and F minor as the key for the band piece, when in fact it's actually C minor. The reason I did that is because C Songs actually does begin in the key of A flat major. So for that video, I used a portion of the piece which was in fact in C minor, or B minor for the orchestral version. So this viewer was correct. I should have used C minor and B minor to demonstrate this example. So anyway, I apologize viewers, but I'm not beyond making mistakes myself, and if I do make them, I will correct them. Some people have asked me, should they do David Lucas Burge's Perfect Pitch ear training course? Well, I highly recommend it. That's what worked for me as I talked about it in the first video. However, if I were to give you one additional piece of advice, I would say try to do it with a partner, because that's what I did. The original first version of the course, it required you to have a partner. I recommend you do that because that's what worked for me. I know the newer version says that you don't have to use a partner, but I just think it's going to be easier to develop perfect pitch if you have a partner. And the other thing I might suggest again is that when you're practicing the ear training techniques, maybe do something where you're distracted a little bit, such as drawing a picture or maybe doing something with your hands, working with tools. If you can do something like that where you can make your ears relax, that can be really helpful to hearing the pitch colors that are out there. So, if you have more additional questions or comments, leave them below on this video, and perhaps I might make a part 3 to this video series on perfect pitch if I think there's enough useful content to do so. I am composer Britt Andrew Burns. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon on the next video.